Christmas morning at my parents' house should have been magical. Instead, I watched my 8-year-old daughter Emma clutch a $3 notebook while my brother Derek's twins unwrapped their third expensive gift. Tyler, age 10, whooped as he tore open a PlayStation 5 box. 9-year-old Sophia squealed over noise-canceling headphones. Meanwhile, Emma forced a smile, whispering, "It's pretty, Daddy," about her dollar store notebook. Dad beamed, announcing how fair everything was this year. That's when I noticed the receipt sticking out of the PS5 box. My name was on it. The living room looked like a tornado had hit a Best Buy store. Wrapping paper scattered everywhere in festive chaos, but the gifts told a completely different story. I sat on Mom's old floral couch, watching my daughter Emma carefully smooth out the colorful paper from her presents, like she wanted to save every piece. Meanwhile, Derek's kids, Tyler and Sophia, tossed expensive packaging aside without a second glance. Tyler ripped into his fourth box, revealing a MacBook Air. "Oh my God, this is sick," he shouted immediately, powering it on. The Apple logo glowed as he started setting up his new laptop right there on the carpet. Sophia had moved on from her headphones to unwrap what looked like a designer winter coat. The North Face label was clearly visible as she held it up. "This is exactly what Madison has at school," she said, already planning her return to 6th grade after winter break. Emma sat beside me, organizing her 3 gifts in a neat little pile. The notebook I'd already seen, a pack of generic crayons that came in a plastic bag instead of a box, and a thin cotton scarf with a price tag that someone had forgotten to remove. $2.99. "Everyone's being so generous this year," Dad said, settling into his recliner with his coffee mug. Frank had always been the family patriarch, the kind of man who believed his word was law and his decisions were always fair. At 68, he still carried himself like the construction foreman he'd been for 30 years before retirement. "It's important that all the grandchildren feel equally loved." I felt my jaw clench. Equally loved. Now, Bruno. Mom chimed in from the kitchen where she was preparing our traditional Christmas brunch. Linda had been playing peacekeeper for as long as I could remember, always smoothing over conflicts before they could fully surface. The children are happy. That's what matters. But Emma wasn't happy. I could see it in the way she kept glancing at her cousin's pile of expensive electronics and designer clothes. She was trying so hard to be grateful, to be the good girl she'd always been, but her 8-year-old heart couldn't quite hide the hurt. "Dad, can I use Tyler's laptop later?" she asked quietly, moving closer to me on the couch. "We'll see, sweetheart," I said, wrapping my arm around her small shoulders. She leaned into me, and I could feel the disappointment radiating from her tiny frame. Derek emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate loaded with Mom's famous cinnamon rolls. At 35, my older brother had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Even when we were kids, Derek got the bigger bedroom, the better bike, the first choice of everything. I'd told myself things would be different as adults, but apparently some patterns never change. "The kids love everything," Derek said, settling into the other armchair. "Patricia's going to flip when she sees all this stuff. She's picking them up at noon for her family's celebration." I watched Tyler and Sophia continuing to explore their new gadgets. Between the two of them, they'd received easily $1,500 worth of presents. Meanwhile, Emma's entire Christmas probably cost less than $20. "Derek," I said carefully, "these are some pretty expensive gifts." My brother shrugged. "Kids grow up fast. Gotta keep up with technology, you know. Tyler's starting middle school next year. He'll need a decent computer for homework and projects." That's when I noticed it. The PlayStation 5 box was angled just right, and a receipt had slipped out from where someone had hastily stuffed it back inside after unwrapping. I could see partial text, but what caught my attention was the credit card number. The last 4 digits were ones I knew by heart because I looked at them every time I paid my bills. My heart started racing. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to help Emma organize her crayons while getting a better look at the receipt. There it was, clear as day, my credit card number, my name, yesterday's date. $899 for a PlayStation 5 Pro bundle. Emma, honey, why don't you go help Grandma in the kitchen? I suggested keeping my voice level despite the fury building in my chest. She nodded and skipped away, still carrying her notebook like it was made of gold. I waited until she was out of earshot before reaching over and pulling the receipt completely out of the box. "Bruno, what are you doing?" Derek asked, but his voice had changed. There was a nervousness there that hadn't been present moments before. I held up the receipt. "Want to explain why my credit card was used to buy Tyler's PlayStation?" The room went silent, except for the sound of Tyler's game booting up and Sophia taking selfies with her new phone. Dad set down his coffee mug with a sharp clink against the ceramic coaster. "Now hold on." Dad started, but I cut him off. "No, you hold on." I studied the receipt more carefully. Not only was it my card, but the purchase had been made at a Best Buy about 10 miles away from Derek's house. "Derek, did you use my credit card?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Derek said, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. Instead, he was focused intently on his cinnamon roll. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Sure enough, there was the charge from yesterday, $899.15, including tax. But as I scrolled through my recent transactions, I saw more charges I didn't recognize. Target for $312, Apple Store for $650, Best Buy again for $299. "There are more charges here," I said, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. "Derek, what the hell is going on?" Tyler looked up from his PlayStation. "Uncle Bruno, are you okay? You sound mad." "I'm fine, buddy," I said, forcing a smile for my nephew. "Adults are just talking about boring grown-up stuff." But I wasn't fine. I was discovering that someone in my family had been using my credit card without permission to fund what looked like a very expensive Christmas shopping spree. And based on Derek's nervous energy and refusal to make eye contact, I had a pretty good idea who that someone was. Mom appeared from the kitchen wiping her hands on her Christmas apron. "What's all the commotion about?" I held up the receipt. "Someone used my credit card to buy these presents, and I'd like to know who and why." The look that passed between my parents didn't escape my notice. It was brief, but it was there. A shared glance that suggested this wasn't news to them. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation," Mom said, but her voice had taken on that overly bright tone she used when she was trying to deflect serious conversations. "I hope so," I replied, because right now it looks like someone stole my credit card information to buy Christmas presents, and that someone is sitting right here in this room. I cornered Derek in the hallway, outside the bathroom 20 minutes later, after the kids had gotten distracted by their new toys and the adults had awkwardly tried to return to normal Christmas conversation. My brother looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Okay, Derek, cut the act," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "I know you used my card. What I want to know is how and why." Derek ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Look, Bruno, it's not what you think. What I think is that you stole my credit card information and spent over $2,000 without my permission. Please explain how that's not what happened." "I didn't steal anything," Derek protested, glancing toward the living room where we could hear Tyler explaining the PlayStation's features to Emma. "Mom and Dad have your card information for emergencies. Remember, when Dad had his heart attack last year, you gave them access to help with medical bills." The heart attack? I'd completely forgotten about that arrangement. Dad had suffered a massive coronary 13 months ago, and with all the chaos of hospital visits, specialist appointments, and insurance complications, I'd given my parents access to one of my credit cards to help cover immediate expenses. But that was supposed to be for medical emergencies only. That was for Dad's medical bills, Derek, not for Christmas shopping. I know, Derek said, holding up his hands. But things have been really tight for us lately. Patricia got laid off from her job at the insurance company back in September, and we're behind on everything. The mortgage, car payments, Tyler's basketball league fees. Mom mentioned that you probably wouldn't mind helping out family, especially for Christmas. I stared at my brother in disbelief. You asked our parents to use my credit card to buy your kids presents. It wasn't like that, Derek said quickly. Mom suggested it. She said you've been doing well with your accounting firm and that you'd want all the kids to have a good Christmas. I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, but she insisted. Something about his story didn't add up. I pulled out my phone again and started scrolling through my credit card statements more carefully. The recent charges I'd noticed weren't just from yesterday's shopping trip. There were charges going back months. Derek, there's a Netflix charge on here from October, and Spotify, and what looks like a grocery store charge for $400 in November. My brother's face went pale. I can explain those. I'm listening. When Patricia lost her job, we had to cut everything. Cable streaming services even started shopping at food banks. Mom felt terrible seeing the kids go without their shows and music, so she offered to put our streaming services on your account temporarily, just until we got back on our feet. I scrolled further back. July, a charge for $600 at Dick's Sporting Goods. June, $800 at Target. May, $450 at GameStop. This had been going on for over 7 months. Derek, there are thousands of dollars in charges here that I never made. I can pay you back, Derek said quickly. Once Patricia finds a new job, once things settle down, I'll pay back every penny, I swear. That's not the point. I snapped, then caught myself and lowered my voice again. The point is that you used my credit card without permission. That's called theft, Derek. Identity theft, actually. It's not theft when it's family helping family. Derek shot back, some of his defensiveness returning. And it's not like you can't afford it. You're single, you've got a good job, you live in that nice apartment downtown. Emma doesn't need much anyway. She's a simple kid. The comment about Emma hit me like a physical blow. What did you just say? I didn't mean it like that, Derek backtracked. I just meant that she's not demanding like other kids her age. She's happy with simple things. So that makes it okay to steal from me, to buy your kids expensive presents, while my daughter gets dollar store scraps. Nobody's stealing from anybody. Mom's voice cut in from behind us. Linda had apparently been listening to our conversation from around the corner. Family helps family, Bruno. That's how we raised you boys. I turned to face my mother, this woman who had taught me right from wrong, who had made me apologize to store clerks when I'd accidentally knocked over displays as a child, who had grounded me for weeks when I'd borrowed $5 from Dad's wallet without asking. Mom, did you authorize Derek to use my credit card? I authorized helping your brother through a difficult time, she said carefully. Patricia losing her job has been hard on everyone, especially the children. We thought you'd understand. Understand what? Understand having my identity stolen by my own family. Don't be so dramatic, Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. It's not identity theft. You gave us access to your account for emergencies. Well, this was an emergency. I pulled up my banking app again and showed her the screen. Mom, there are charges here for video games, clothes, restaurant meals, streaming services. None of this is emergency medical expenses. Sometimes emergencies aren't just medical, Bruno. Sometimes they're about keeping a family together, about making sure children don't suffer because their parents are struggling. I felt like I was taking crazy pills. So the solution was to steal from me and my daughter. Nobody stole anything. Dad's voice boomed from the living room doorway. Frank had apparently joined our impromptu family meeting. And I don't appreciate you using that word about your brother. Then what would you call using someone else's credit card without permission? I'd call it family taking care of family, Dad said firmly. Derek's going through a rough patch. We all are in different ways. You've been blessed with success, Bruno. Some people might say you have a responsibility to help those less fortunate. Those less fortunate, I repeated. Dad, Derek makes almost as much as I do at the construction company. And even if he didn't, that doesn't give him the right to steal from me. There's that word again, Dad said sharply. Your brother didn't steal anything. He borrowed with the understanding that he'd pay it back when he could. Borrowed. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. When you borrow something, you ask permission first. You don't just take it and hope the person you took it from doesn't notice. Mom stepped closer, placing her hand on my arm in what I suppose was meant to be a comforting gesture. Bruno, honey, we're family. Family doesn't keep score like this. Derek would do the same for you if the situation were reversed. But would he? I tried to remember a single time Derek had sacrificed anything for my benefit. When I was going through my divorce 2 years ago and struggling to make ends meet while paying lawyer fees and establishing my own apartment, had Derek offered to help. When Emma needed emergency dental work last spring, and my insurance only covered part of it, had Derek stepped up. I need to see exactly how much money we're talking about, I said, pulling up my credit card company's website on my phone, and I need to know everything that's been charged to my account. What I found made my stomach drop. The charges went back even further than I had initially realized. Almost a full year of unauthorized purchases. Groceries, gas, utilities, entertainment clothes, electronics. Someone had been systematically using my credit card to fund what looked like Derek's entire lifestyle. But the most shocking discovery wasn't the amount of money, though. That was staggering. It was a pending charge scheduled for next week. $25,000 to something called Patriot Home Lending, with a note in the transaction details that read, down payment. Derek, I said slowly, what's Patriot Home Lending? My brother's face went completely white. I don't know what that is. I showed him the screen. It's a $25,000 charge scheduled for December 27th. Ring any bells? Derek looked like he was about to be sick. That's not supposed to go through until we close on the house. What house? And that's when the real scope of this betrayal became clear. Derek hadn't just been using my credit card for Christmas presents and living expenses. He'd been using it to qualify for a mortgage. My credit, my income, my financial information had been used to secure a loan for a house I'd never seen in a transaction I'd never agreed to. Derek, I said quietly, what have you done? I demanded that everyone sit down in the living room for a family meeting. The kids were shuffled off to the basement rec room with their new toys, though I could see Emma lingering at the top of the stairs, sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. Emma, honey, go play with Tyler and Sophia, I said gently. The grown-ups need to talk. She nodded reluctantly and disappeared downstairs, but not before giving me a worried look that broke my heart. My 8-year-old daughter shouldn't have to worry about adult problems, especially not on Christmas morning. I stood in front of the fireplace holding my phone with all the evidence of financial fraud displayed on the screen. Mom and Dad sat on the couch, Derek slumped in his usual armchair. The atmosphere felt like a funeral rather than a holiday celebration. I need everyone to understand what's been happening here. I began trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. For almost a year, someone has been using my credit card to make unauthorized purchases. We're talking about thousands of dollars in charges that I never approved and never made. Bruno. Mom started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. These charges include groceries, gas streaming services, restaurant meals, clothing, electronics, and apparently a $25,000 down payment for a house. Derek, I need you to explain to me how my credit card is being used to buy you a house. Derek wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the carpet like it held the secrets of the universe. It's not that simple. Make it simple for me. When we applied for the mortgage, we needed to show more income and better credit than what Patricia and I had on our own. The loan officer suggested adding a co-signer or finding another way to demonstrate financial stability. So you decided to use my identity, not your identity, Derek said quickly. Just your credit card for some of the financial documentation, to show that we had access to additional resources if needed. Dad leaned forward in his chair. That sounds reasonable to me. Family helping family achieve the American dream. I turned to stare at my father. Dad, what Derek is describing is mortgage fraud. It's a federal crime. Don't be so dramatic, Mom said, echoing her earlier dismissal. People help family members buy houses all the time. People co-sign loans, Mom. They don't steal credit cards and forge financial documents. Derek finally looked up at me, and what I saw in his expression wasn't remorse or guilt. It was resentment. You know what, Bruno? Maybe I did use your card more than I should have. But you want to know why? Because you live in your fancy apartment downtown, driving your nice car, taking Emma to expensive restaurants and weekend trips. Meanwhile, my kids are wearing second-hand clothes and eating generic cereal because their mother lost her job. Derek, you make $70,000 a year as a project supervisor. That's not poverty. It's not enough, though, is it? Not in this economy. Not with 2 kids who need sports equipment and school supplies and clothes that don't make them look poor in front of their friends. So your solution was to steal from me. I didn't steal from you, Derek shouted, finally losing his composure. I borrowed from you with the understanding that family takes care of family. Family takes care of family, I repeated slowly. Okay, let's talk about that. When I was going through my divorce and could barely afford groceries, some weeks, did you offer to help? When Emma needed dental work and I was scrambling to find the money, did you step up? When my car broke down and I had to choose between fixing it and paying rent, where was this family takes care of family philosophy? Then, the room fell silent except for the distant sounds of children playing in the basement. That's different, Mom said quietly. How is it different? You were managing okay, she explained. You figured things out. You always do. Derek's situation is more serious. More serious than your granddaughter not having a Christmas? Emma had a Christmas, Dad said firmly. She got presents. Maybe not expensive ones, but she got presents. I felt something snap inside me. Dad, my daughter got a $3 notebook and some crayons. Meanwhile, Derek's kids got laptops and game systems bought with my stolen credit card. And you're telling me that's fair. Life isn't fair, son. Dad said, using the same tone he'd used when I was 10 years old and complaining about Derek getting a bigger piece of cake. Some people have more, some people have less. The important thing is that family sticks together. Even when that family is stealing from each other, stop using that word, Mom snapped. Derek is not a thief. He's your brother, and he's struggling, and instead of being grateful that you're in a position to help, you're acting like a spoiled child. A spoiled child. I laughed bitterly. I'm acting like someone who just discovered that his family has been systematically stealing from him for almost a year. You're acting like someone who's forgotten where he comes from, Dad said, standing up from the couch. At 6'2" and still broad through the shoulders despite his age, Frank could be intimidating when he wanted to be. Derek's got 2 kids to think about. You've got 1. Derek's wife is out of work. You're doing fine on your own. Maybe it's time you started thinking about someone besides yourself. Thinking about someone besides myself? The hypocrisy was staggering. Dad, I've been unknowingly supporting Derek's entire family for almost a year. I've been paying for their groceries, their gas, their entertainment, their kids' sports fees. How exactly is that thinking only about myself? Because you didn't do it willingly, Derek said, speaking up again. If you'd done it willingly, it would have been generous. Since you're complaining about it now, it just proves that you never really cared about helping your family in the first place. I stared at my brother in amazement. Derek, do you hear yourself right now? You're blaming me for not enthusiastically embracing being stolen from. I'm saying that if the situation were reversed, I'd be happy to help you out. When has the situation ever been reversed? When have you ever helped me with anything? Derek was quiet for a moment, then said, I helped you move into your apartment after the divorce. You helped me carry boxes for 3 hours, Derek. That's not the same thing as paying someone's mortgage for a year. Mom stood up and moved to Derek's side, placing her hand on his shoulder in a gesture of support that spoke volumes. Bruno, I think you need to step back and consider the bigger picture here. Derek made some mistakes, yes, but they came from a place of desperation, not malice. He's got a family to provide for. So do I, Mom. Emma's fine, Mom said dismissively. She's resilient. She doesn't need much to be happy. And there it was again, the assumption that my daughter mattered less because she was simple or resilient or fine with less. The idea that Derek's children deserved laptops and game systems, while my daughter should be grateful for a $3 notebook. "You know what?" I said, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "I need to make some calls." "What kind of calls?" Dad asked suspiciously. "I need to call my credit card company and report fraudulent charges. I need to call the mortgage company to report identity theft. And I need to call the police to file a report." "Bruno, you can't be serious," Mom gasped. "I'm completely serious. Someone has stolen thousands of dollars from me and committed mortgage fraud using my identity. That's not a family disagreement. That's a crime." Derek jumped to his feet. "You'd really call the police on your own brother? My own brother stole thousands of dollars from me and my daughter. What would you do?" "I'd handle it within the family," Derek said. "Like a man." "Like a man," I repeated. "Derek, you've been stealing from your brother and niece for a year, and now you want to lecture me about being a man?" That's when I heard small footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared at the bottom of the staircase, her face streaked with tears. "Daddy, why is everyone yelling? Did I do something wrong?" My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Come here." She ran to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. I could feel her small body shaking. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. "No, baby, we're not in trouble, but I think it's time for us to go home." Emma nodded against my chest, and I realized that my 8-year-old daughter understood better than the adults in this room that something was fundamentally broken here. "Get your coat, sweetheart," I said quietly. "We're leaving." Emma was quiet during the drive home, staring out the passenger window as familiar Christmas decorations blurred past. The silence in my Honda Civic felt heavy after the chaos we just escaped from my parents' house. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Derek's truck following us, but the road stayed empty. "Daddy!" Emma's voice was small, uncertain. "What is it, sweetheart?" Did I get bad presents because I was bad this year? I had to pull over. Right there on Maple Street, 3 blocks from our apartment, I put the car in park and turned to face my daughter. Her brown eyes were wide with worry, and she was clutching that $3 notebook like a lifeline. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," I said, reaching over to touch her cheek. "You got different presents because some grown-ups made very bad choices. It has absolutely nothing to do with you being good or bad. You are the best little girl in the world, and you deserve so much more than what happened today. But Tyler and Sophia got computers and games and nice clothes. I know they did, and that wasn't fair. Will we ever have enough money for nice things?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, because I realized Emma had been thinking about our family's finances in ways that 8-year-olds shouldn't have to think about money. She'd been comparing her life to her cousin's life and finding herself lacking, not understanding that the comparison wasn't based on reality. "We have enough money for what we need and some of what we want," I told her truthfully. What happened today was that some of our money was taken without permission to buy other people things. That's why the presents seemed unfair. Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the seriousness of a much older person. "Are you going to get our money back?" "I'm going to try very hard to get our money back." "Good," she said firmly. "We need it more than they do." Out of the mouths of babes. When we got home to our 2-bedroom apartment on Oak Street, I settled Emma in the living room with hot chocolate and a Disney movie, while I spread my financial documents across the kitchen table. What I discovered during that Christmas afternoon was worse than I'd initially feared. The unauthorized charges on my credit card went back even further than I'd thought. 14 months of systematic theft, starting just after Dad's heart attack when I'd given my parents access to my account for medical emergencies. But as I traced the timeline, it became clear that Derek's financial manipulation had started almost immediately after my parents got access to my information. My laptop was open to 3 different browser windows: my bank account, my credit card statements, and my credit report. What I found in my credit report made my blood run cold. Derek hadn't just been using my existing credit card. Somehow, he'd managed to open additional accounts using my Social Security number and personal information. There was a Best Buy credit card I'd never applied for with a $4,000 limit that was maxed out. a Target card with $1,500 in charges, even a Home Depot card that had been used to purchase what looked like materials for home renovation projects. I called the customer service number for my primary credit card company first. "Thank you for calling First National Bank. This is Jennifer. How can I help you today? I need to report fraudulent charges on my account. Multiple charges over the past 14 months that I did not authorize." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Can I get your account number and the last 4 digits of your Social Security number?" I provided the information and waited while Jennifer pulled up my account. "I see several recent charges here, Mr. Martinez. Can you tell me which specific charges you're disputing?" "All of them going back to November of last year," I said. "Someone has been using my card without authorization for over a year." There was a pause. "Sir, are we talking about charges made by family members who have access to your account?" The question caught me off guard. "How did you know that?" "Well, sir, many of these charges are at family-oriented stores and for everyday purchases, like groceries and gas. Also, I see here that you previously authorized additional users on this account for medical emergency purposes." I authorized my parents to use the card for medical emergencies related to my father's heart attack. I did not authorize anyone to use it for general purchases or to open additional credit accounts in my name. "I understand your concern, sir. However, when you add authorized users to an account, they generally have the same access privileges as the primary cardholder, unless specific restrictions are put in place." "Are you telling me that my parents could legally give my credit card information to other people?" "Not exactly, sir, but if family members had access to the card through your parents, the legal situation becomes more complicated. I'd recommend speaking with a law enforcement officer about identity theft if you believe crimes have been committed." After hanging up with the credit card company, I called the number for my credit report service. "This is Marcus with Credit Card Services. How can I assist you? I need to understand how multiple credit accounts were opened in my name without my knowledge." "Have you been the victim of identity theft, sir?" "I think so. My brother appears to have used my personal information to open credit cards and possibly apply for a mortgage." "That's definitely identity theft, sir. I'd recommend placing a fraud alert on your credit report immediately and filing a police report. Do you have any idea how the perpetrator obtained your personal information?" I laughed bitterly. "He's my brother. He's had access to my Social Security number and personal information our entire lives." "I'm sorry, sir, but family relationships don't change the legal definition of identity theft. If someone used your personal information to open accounts without your permission, that's a crime, regardless of your relationship to that person." By the time Emma's movie was over, I'd filed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus, disputed the unauthorized charges with multiple credit card companies, and started the process of closing accounts I'd never opened. The financial damage was staggering. Over $40,000 in fraudulent charges and credit lines that I was potentially responsible for. But the mortgage fraud was the most serious issue. $25,000 of my money was scheduled to be transferred to a home loan that would make me partially responsible for Derek's mortgage payments. If I didn't stop the transfer before it processed, I could be legally liable for a loan on a house I'd never seen in a transaction I'd never agreed to. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Daddy, are you okay? You look sad." "I'm working on fixing the money problem," I told her, "but it might take a while." "Can I help?" I smiled at her earnest offer. "Actually, there is something you can help me with. I need to make sure we're protected, so I'm going to change some passwords and cancel some services. Can you be my assistant?" "Yes?" Emma climbed onto the chair next to me, ready to help save our family's finances. The first step was changing every password I had. Bank accounts, credit cards, email, even streaming services. If Derek had access to any of my financial information through my parents, I needed to cut off that access immediately. Next, I started canceling services. My parents' cell phone plan was an add onto my account that I'd agreed to pay for after Dad's heart attack when their fixed income was stretched thin by medical bills. That got canceled. The streaming services that Derek had been using my account for. Canceled. The family plan for cloud storage that somehow included Derek's devices. Canceled. Then I made the big decision, the one that felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. My parents' health insurance was supplemental coverage that I'd agreed to pay for when Dad's Medicare didn't cover all his heart medications. $320 a month that came directly out of my checking account. I canceled it. The internet service at my parents' house that I'd been paying for so Dad could do online banking and Mom could video chat with Emma during the week. I canceled it. Even their car insurance. I'd added them to my policy after Dad's heart attack to get them a better rate. I removed them. By the time I finished, I'd cut off every financial connection between my family and my accounts. Derek's free ride was over, and my parents were going to wake up tomorrow to discover that their financial safety net had been yanked away. Emma helped me document everything, writing down confirmation numbers for canceled services in her careful 8-year-old handwriting. She seemed to understand that we were protecting ourselves, and she took the job seriously. "Are Uncle Derek and Aunt Patricia going to be mad at us?" she asked, as I submitted the final cancellation. "Probably," I admitted. "But sometimes people get mad when they can't do wrong things anymore. Like when I get mad when you won't let me eat candy for breakfast." Exactly like that. The last call I made was to the police department's non-emergency line. "Riverside Police Department, this is Officer Chen. I need to file a report for identity theft and credit card fraud." "Are you in immediate danger, sir?" "No, but I've discovered that family members have been using my personal information to commit financial fraud, and I need to document it officially." "Can you come in tomorrow morning to file the report? We'll need documentation of the fraudulent activity and any evidence you have of who might be responsible." "I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning." After I hung up Emma, and I sat in the quiet kitchen surrounded by financial documents and confirmation numbers. Outside it was getting dark, and I could see Christmas lights twinkling in neighbors' windows. It should have felt peaceful, but I knew my phone was going to start ringing soon. "Daddy, will Christmas be different next year?" Emma asked. "Yes, sweetheart, it will be much different." "Good different or bad different?" I looked at my daughter, this brave little girl who'd handled today's chaos with more grace than any of the adults involved, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. "Good different," I said. "Definitely good different." My phone started buzzing at 11:37 that night. The first call was from Mom, then Dad, then Derek, then Mom again. By midnight, I had 68 missed calls and over 200 text messages. I turned the phone off and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow was going to change everything. I woke up at 6 a.m. on December 26th to discover my phone had somehow turned itself back on during the night and was buzzing like an angry hornet. 68 missed calls, all from various combinations of my family members. The text messages had multiplied too, ranging from confused to angry to downright threatening. Emma was still sleeping in her room, exhausted from yesterday's emotional roller coaster. I made coffee quietly and sat at the kitchen table to read through the digital hurricane that had apparently erupted overnight. Mom, 12:37 a.m. "Bruno, call me right now. Dad's prescriptions got denied at the pharmacy." Derek, 12:45 a.m. "What did you do?" "Our internet is down and Patricia can't work from home without it." Dad, 1:15 a.m. "Son, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this isn't the way to handle family problems." Derek, 1:23 a.m. "My credit card got declined at the grocery store. What the hell did you do to our accounts?" Mom, 2 a.m. "Your father is having chest pains. If he has another heart attack because of this stress, his blood will be on your hands." Derek, 2:30 a.m. "You better fix this, Bruno. I'm not playing around. My family depends on those services." And so it went, dozens of increasingly frantic and angry messages as my family discovered the scope of what I'd done. Around 3 a.m., the threats started getting more specific. Derek, 3:12 a.m. "I know where you work and what time Emma's school starts. Don't test me." That message made me screenshot everything and forward it to my email. If Derek was threatening my daughter, this had moved beyond a family dispute into something that required police intervention. My coffee was still hot when my phone rang again. Dad's number. "Bruno, we need to talk." "Good morning, Dad. Merry Boxing Day." "Don't get smart with me, son. Your mother spent half the night in the emergency room because her blood pressure medication got denied by the insurance company. They said our coverage was terminated yesterday." "That's correct." "What do you mean that's correct?" "I mean, I canceled your supplemental insurance coverage yesterday afternoon, along with several other services that I'd been paying for." There was a long silence. "Bruno, your mother could have died." "No, Dad, she couldn't have. Mom has Medicare and her primary insurance through your retirement plan. The supplemental coverage I was paying for helped with co-pays and prescription costs, but it wasn't life or death coverage. The pharmacy wanted $800 for her blood pressure medication without the supplemental plan. Then she should call her doctor to request a generic alternative, or you should pay the $800 yourselves. You know the way most people handle their medical expenses." "We can't afford $800, Bruno. You know that." "Really? Because Derek seems to be able to afford $25,000 down payments on houses and PlayStation 5s for his kids. Maybe ask him to help with Mom's medication." Another long silence. "What your brother does with his money is his business. What he does with my money is my business, Dad, and as of yesterday, he doesn't have access to my money anymore." "Bruno, you're being unreasonable." "I'm being unreasonable." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Dad, someone in our family stole over $40,000 from me and my daughter. I'm the victim here, not the villain." "Nobody stole anything from you, son." "Then what would you call it?" "I'd call it family helping family during a difficult time. Without permission, without my knowledge, and definitely without my consent. Sometimes family has to make hard decisions for the good of everyone involved. Hard decisions like stealing from your other son to subsidize Derek's lifestyle." Dad's voice got harder, colder. "Derek's got 2 kids to think about, Bruno. You've got advantages he doesn't have." "What advantages?" "You're single. Your expenses are lower. You don't have a wife and 2 children depending on you. I have a daughter depending on me, Dad. And apparently, I've been supporting Derek's wife and 2 children without knowing it. Emma's fine. She doesn't need much to be happy." There it was again. The assumption that my daughter mattered less because she was supposedly easier to please. "Dad, Emma is not fine. She had to watch her cousins unwrap thousands of dollars worth of presents bought with money that should have gone toward her college fund while she got a $3 notebook." "How is that fine?" "She seemed happy enough yesterday morning." "She seemed polite, Dad. There's a difference." I heard Mom's voice in the background asking to talk to me. Dad handed over the phone. "Bruno, honey, please don't do this to us," Mom pleaded. "We're your parents. We raised you and loved you and sacrificed for you." "Mom, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting myself and my daughter from financial abuse." "Financial abuse." Her voice rose to a near shriek. "How dare you accuse us of abusing you? What would you call using my credit card without permission to fund Derek's family for over a year?" "I would call it helping family members who were struggling." "Then why didn't anyone ask me first?" Mom was quiet for a moment. "Because we knew you'd say no. And that didn't tell you anything about whether or not you should be doing it. It told us that you've become selfish and money-focused since your divorce." The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely unfair. I had become more careful about money since the divorce, more protective of my financial security. But that was because I'd learned the hard way what it meant to be financially vulnerable. Mom, being careful with money isn't the same thing as being selfish. And even if I am more money-focused now, that doesn't give anyone the right to steal from me. "We didn't steal from you, Bruno. We borrowed with the intention of paying you back." When were you planning to pay me back?" Another long silence. "When Derek got back on his feet." "Derek has been on his feet this entire time, Mom. He makes good money. His wife wasn't unemployed when this started. And even if she was, that's not my responsibility." "Family is always your responsibility." "No, Mom, my daughter is my responsibility. Derek's family is Derek's responsibility." "I can't believe how cold you've become. I can't believe how easily you justify stealing from your own son." The call ended with Mom hanging up on me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Derek this time. "Bruno, we need to meet and work this out like men." "There's nothing to work out, Derek. You stole from me. I've reported it to the authorities. End of story." "Look, I know I made some mistakes, but you're blowing this way out of proportion. $40,000 in mortgage fraud is not a mistake, Derek. It's a crime. I can pay you back." "With what money? The money you told Mom and Dad you didn't have?" Derek was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've been lying about your financial situation, Derek. I did some research yesterday after I got home. Your wife Patricia wasn't laid off from her job. She quit to go back to school. And you didn't get demoted or have your hours cut. You got promoted to senior project supervisor 6 months ago. How did you find that out?" "It's called the Internet, Derek. Your company has a website with staff listings. LinkedIn exists. It took me about 10 minutes to figure out that everything you told Mom and Dad about your financial struggles was complete fiction." "Okay, so maybe I exaggerated how bad things were." "You lied, Derek. You lied to our parents to manipulate them into giving you access to my money. I needed help getting the house, so you decided to commit mortgage fraud." "It's not mortgage fraud when it's family money." "Derek, do you hear yourself? You're trying to justify committing federal crimes by saying we're related." "I'm trying to take care of my family. By stealing from mine." Derek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Gotten uglier. "You know what, Bruno? Maybe I did take more than I should have. But you want to know why? Because you've always had it easier than me. You went to college. You got your fancy accounting degree. You've got your nice apartment and your good job and your perfect little life. I worked for everything I have, Derek. You worked with advantages I never got. Mom and Dad paid for your college. They helped you get your first apartment. They bought you a car when you graduated." I was stunned. "Derek, what are you talking about? I took out student loans for college. I worked 3 jobs to afford my first apartment, and I bought my own car. That's not how I remember it?" "Then your memory is wrong. My memory is that you always got the breaks and I always got the leftovers. So your solution was to steal from me and my daughter. My solution was to finally get what I deserved, and there it was. The real truth? Derek hadn't stolen from me because he was desperate or struggling. He'd stolen from me because he felt entitled to what I had, because he believed that life owed him something, and taking from me was just balancing the scales. "Derek," I said quietly, "you don't deserve anything that belongs to me, and you sure as hell don't deserve anything that belongs to my daughter." "We'll see about that," Derek said, and the menace in his voice made my blood run cold. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. This isn't over, Bruno. Not by a long shot." The call ended, and I immediately called the police station to add Derek's threats to my report. As I dialed, I realized that this situation was about to get much worse before it got better. Detective Sarah Walsh was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with short auburn hair and sharp green eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my story. We sat in a small conference room at the Riverside Police Department while Emma colored quietly in the corner with crayons and paper that Detective Walsh had thoughtfully provided. "Mr. Martinez, I want to make sure I understand the timeline here," Detective Walsh said, reviewing her notes. "The unauthorized use of your credit card began approximately 14 months ago, shortly after you gave your parents access for medical emergency expenses related to your father's heart attack." "That's correct." "And you estimate the total amount of fraudulent charges at around $40,000, plus the $25,000 pending mortgage transaction that I managed to stop yesterday." Detective Walsh whistled low. "That's significant. Most family financial abuse cases we see are smaller amounts over shorter periods. This shows a level of planning and sophistication that's concerning." "What do you mean by sophistication?" "Well, opening multiple credit accounts using your information requires more than just having access to your credit card. Someone would need your Social Security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name, employment information. They'd also need to intercept mail or redirect statements to avoid detection." A chill ran down my spine. "My mail? What about it? I've been wondering why I never received statements for those additional credit cards. I live in an apartment complex with individual mailboxes, but Derek has a key to help me get packages when I travel for work. Detective Walsh made a note. So your brother had physical access to your mail, and my parents' house is listed as my emergency contact for most financial accounts because that's been my permanent address since I was a kid, even though I haven't lived there in years. That's how he intercepted the statements and approval notifications for the new accounts, Detective Walsh concluded. Mr. Martinez, what you're describing isn't just credit card fraud. It's a comprehensive identity theft scheme that's been running for over a year. Is that worse somehow? Identity theft is a federal crime. If the dollar amounts you're describing are accurate, and if it crosses state lines in any way, this becomes something the FBI might be interested in. Before I could respond, Detective Walsh's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Excuse me for just a moment. Detective Walsh. Yes, he's here now. What? Her expression grew serious. How many victims? When can you be here? Okay, we'll wait. She hung up and turned back to me. Mr. Martinez, that was Detective Reynolds from our Financial Crimes Unit. Apparently, your brother's name has come up in another investigation. What kind of investigation? Derek works for Morrison Construction, correct? Yes, as a project supervisor. We've been investigating reports of financial fraud involving Morrison Construction employees. It seems your brother might be running similar schemes on other families through his workplace connections. Emma looked up from her coloring. Daddy, what's a scheme? It's when someone tricks people to take their money, sweetheart, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Detective Walsh's phone buzzed with a text. She read it quickly. Detective Reynolds is on his way up with some files you might find interesting. 10 minutes later, Detective Tom Reynolds entered the conference room carrying a thick folder and a laptop. He was older than Detective Walsh, probably mid-40s, with graying hair and the tired look of someone who'd seen too much financial crime. Mr. Martinez, I understand your brother is Derek Martinez, project supervisor at Morrison Construction. That's right. Detective Reynolds opened his laptop and turned it toward me. We've been investigating Derek for 3 months as part of a larger financial fraud ring. What you've described to Detective Walsh fits the pattern we've been seeing. On the screen was a spreadsheet with multiple names, amounts, and dates. I recognized some of the names as people Derek worked with, neighbors from my parents' street, even some family friends. Derek's been doing this to other people. At least 12 other families that we know of, Detective Reynolds said. The scheme is always similar. Derek identifies people who trust him, gains access to their financial information through various means, then systematically drains their accounts while maintaining the pretense of friendship or family relationship. How much money are we talking about? Total around $300,000 across all victims. I felt sick. $300,000? Your case is actually one of the larger individual amounts, Detective Walsh said. Most of the other victims lost between $5,000 and $15,000 before they caught on. Detective Reynolds pulled out several photographs. Do you recognize any of these addresses? The first photo showed a house I didn't recognize. Large brick with a 3-car garage and professional landscaping. It looked expensive. That's the house Derek and Patricia are buying, Detective Reynolds said. Purchase price is $450,000. The down payment came from a combination of fraudulent loans and stolen funds from victims, including yourself. The second photo showed a garage filled with expensive toys, jet skis, ATVs, a boat high-end bicycles. This is Derek's garage, Detective Walsh explained. Purchased over the past 8 months using various stolen credit accounts. The third photo was the most damning. It showed Derek and Patricia at what looked like a casino, dressed in expensive clothes and holding drinks at what appeared to be a high roller table. Derek's been gambling, Detective Reynolds said. We estimate he's lost around $70,000 in the past 6 months at various casinos in neighboring states. So when he told my parents that Patricia lost her job and they were struggling financially, complete fiction. Detective Walsh confirmed. Patricia did leave her job but to pursue a master's degree in business administration at the state university. Derek's salary actually increased by $15,000 this year after his promotion. They've been living off stolen money while pretending to be victims, Detective Reynolds added. It's a sophisticated psychological manipulation combined with identity theft and fraud. Emma had stopped coloring and was listening to the conversation with the intensity that children bring to adult discussions they don't fully understand. "What happens now?" I asked. "We execute search warrants on Derek's home, his workplace, and his financial records," Detective Walsh said. "We'll also be interviewing other victims and gathering evidence for federal charges." Federal charges? Identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Detective Reynolds listed. If convicted on all counts, Derek could be looking at 8 to 12 years in federal prison. What about the other victims? We'll be contacting all of them over the next few days. Many don't realize the full scope of what's happened to them. Like you, they trusted Derek and didn't closely monitor accounts he had access to. Detective Walsh leaned forward. "Mr. Martinez, I need to ask you something important. Has Derek made any direct threats against you or your daughter since you discovered the fraud?" I thought about Derek's phone call that morning and his promise that this isn't over. He called this morning and said this wasn't over, that it was a promise, not a threat. The two detectives exchanged looks. "We're going to recommend that you document any further contact from Derek," Detective Reynolds said. "Don't answer calls from him directly. Let them go to voicemail so we have recordings. And if he shows up at your apartment or Emma's school, call 911 immediately." "Do you think he's dangerous?" "People who commit fraud at this level often escalate when they're caught," Detective Walsh explained. "Derek's about to lose his house, his job, his freedom, and his family. That makes him unpredictable." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message. Derek's number. "You just destroyed my family, Bruno. I hope you're proud of yourself." I showed the message to the detectives. Detective Reynolds photographed it with his phone. "Keep them coming," he said grimly. "Every threat, every contact, every attempt to manipulate or intimidate you. It's all evidence." An hour later, Emma and I left the police station with a case number, contact information for victim services, and the knowledge that Derek's criminal enterprise was much larger than I'd ever imagined. As we drove home, Emma was unusually quiet. "Daddy, is Uncle Derek going to jail?" "Probably, sweetheart." "Good," she said firmly. "People who steal should go to jail." That evening, the news broke. The local television station ran a story about the arrest of a Morrison construction employee in connection with a multifamily fraud scheme. Derek's photo filled the screen as the anchor described the ongoing investigation. My phone started ringing again, but this time it wasn't my family calling. It was reporters, neighbors, and people from the community who had seen the news and wanted to know more about the case. I turned off the phone and made dinner for Emma, grateful that this nightmare was finally moving toward justice. 18 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway, watching Derek being led away in handcuffs after receiving his sentence. 8 years in federal prison for identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. No possibility of parole for the first 5 years. Emma, now 9 years old and noticeably taller than she'd been that devastating Christmas morning, squeezed my hand as we watched her uncle disappear through the security doors that would separate him from his family for nearly a decade. "Are you sad, Daddy?" she asked, looking up at me with those wise brown eyes. "A little," I admitted. "It's complicated when someone you love makes choices that hurt other people." "But it was the right thing to do." "Yes, sweetheart, it was absolutely the right thing to do." The restitution process had been lengthy, but ultimately successful. Between Derek's seized assets, insurance claims, and the Victim Compensation Fund, I recovered $37,000 of the money that had been stolen from us. The remaining $3,000 came from an unexpected source, Uncle Robert. Dad's older brother had been one of Derek's victims, losing $12,000 from his retirement account through a similar scheme. When Uncle Robert learned that Derek had also stolen from us, he insisted on helping make up the difference. Family should protect family. Uncle Robert had said, not prey on each other. The money went directly into Emma's college fund, where it joined my regular monthly contributions and the savings I'd accumulated by no longer unknowingly supporting Derek's extended family. Patricia divorced Derek 6 months after his arrest, once the full scope of his deception became clear. She moved back to her parents' house in Ohio with Tyler and Sophia, who were now 11 and 10 respectively. The divorce was swift and decisive once Patricia realized she'd been as much a victim of Derek's lies as anyone else. I thought we were struggling, Patricia had told me during one difficult phone conversation. Derek showed me fake termination papers, fake rejection letters from job applications. He had me believing that we were barely surviving while he was spending stolen money on gambling trips and expensive toys. Tyler and Sophia had struggled with their father's crimes and the sudden loss of their comfortable lifestyle. The expensive Christmas presents from that terrible morning had been seized as evidence, along with the house, the cars, and everything else Derek had purchased with stolen money. But children are remarkably resilient, and with therapy and the support of Patricia's family, they were slowly healing. Emma still exchanged letters with her cousins, carefully supervised communications that helped all 3 children process the complicated emotions of loving someone who had caused so much harm. My relationship with my parents had been much slower to heal. Dad's second heart attack, which came 3 days after Derek's arrest, had been a wake-up call for all of us about what really mattered. The stress of seeing his golden child led away in handcuffs had triggered another cardiac episode, but this one was milder and responded well to treatment. During Dad's recovery, we'd had many difficult conversations about family favoritism and the difference between helping and enabling. Frank Martinez was not a man who apologized easily, but he eventually acknowledged that he'd been wrong to dismiss my concerns and to assume that Derek's needs automatically superseded Emma's. I thought I was protecting Derek. Dad had said during one visiting session while he was still in cardiac rehabilitation. But I see now that I was just helping him hurt other people. Mom's transformation had been even more dramatic. Linda had entered therapy to understand her role in enabling Derek's behavior and to work through the guilt of having facilitated financial abuse against her own son. The woman who emerged from those counseling sessions was stronger, more self-aware, and determined to rebuild our family on a foundation of honesty rather than favoritism. "I failed you, Bruno," she'd said 6 months after Derek's sentencing. "I failed Emma. And ultimately, I failed Derek too by teaching him that his wants mattered more than other people's rights." Today, Christmas looked completely different in the Martinez family. We celebrated at my apartment rather than my parents' house with modest gifts that were purchased with honestly earned money and given with genuine love rather than guilt or obligation. Emma opened her presents with the same careful attention she'd always shown. But this year, her gifts reflected thoughtful consideration rather than budget constraints. A beginner's guitar that she'd been asking for art supplies for her growing interest in drawing books from her favorite series, and a savings bond for her college fund that she insisted on signing herself. Tyler and Sophia joined us via video call from Ohio, showing off their own modest but meaningful presents. Patricia was visible in the background of their call, looking older but more peaceful than she had during the chaotic years of Derek's scheme. Aunt Linda made us cookies, Sophia announced, holding up a tin decorated with her grandmother's careful handwriting. And Uncle Robert sent us each $50 for our college funds, Tyler added, showing his savings account statement to the camera. Uncle Robert had become an unexpected pillar of strength for our recovering family. At 72 years old, he'd taken on the role of family patriarch that Dad was still learning to fill with wisdom rather than dominance. "Derek's choices don't define this family," Uncle Robert often said. "How we respond to those choices, how we learn and grow and protect each other going forward, that's what defines us." My parents sat on my couch looking smaller somehow than they had 2 years ago, but also more real. Dad's hair had gone completely gray during Derek's legal proceedings, and Mom had developed worry lines that hadn't been there before, but they were present in a way they hadn't been during the years they'd spent managing Derek's fabricated crises. "Emma, show Grandpa the song you've been learning." Mom suggested, gesturing toward the guitar. Emma carefully positioned the instrument and played a simple melody she'd been practicing with her teacher. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers earned through her own effort, rather than purchased with stolen money. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Dad said, and his pride was genuine rather than performative. "You're very talented." After the video call ended and the wrapping paper was cleaned up, Emma and I sat together on the couch, looking through her new books, while my parents prepared dinner in the kitchen. The apartment felt warm and safe in a way that our Christmas celebrations hadn't felt in years. "Daddy, do you think Uncle Derek thinks about us in prison?" It was a question Emma asked periodically, trying to understand the absence of someone who had been part of her life for her entire existence, however complicated that presence had been. "I think he probably does," I said honestly. "I think he probably thinks about a lot of things differently now." "Do you think he's sorry?" "I hope he is, sweetheart. Being sorry is the first step toward becoming a better person." "Will he ever be our family again?" It was the hardest question, the one that got to the heart of everything we'd all been wrestling with. How do you maintain love for someone who has caused tremendous harm? How do you protect your family while still hoping for redemption? "He'll always be your uncle," I said carefully. "But being family isn't just about being related to someone. It's about treating each other with love and respect and honesty." Uncle Derek forgot that for a while. But he could remember again. "Maybe someday. People can change, but they have to want to change, and they have to prove that they've changed through their actions, not just their words." Emma nodded seriously, processing this adult concept with the gravity she brought to all important discussions. "I hope he remembers," she said finally, "but I'm glad he can't take our money anymore." "Me too, sweetheart, me too." That evening, after my parents had gone home and Emma was asleep in her room, I sat at my kitchen table, paying bills. It was a routine I'd once taken for granted, but now it felt like a celebration of independence and security. My credit score had fully recovered from Derek's damage. Emma's college fund was growing steadily. We had an emergency fund that would protect us from unexpected expenses. For the first time in my adult life, I felt financially secure in a way that was based on reality rather than illusion. More importantly, Emma was growing up with a clear understanding of boundaries, consequences, and the difference between helping others and being taken advantage of. She'd learned that love doesn't require you to accept mistreatment, and that standing up for yourself isn't mean or selfish when someone is genuinely harming you. The 11 other families that Derek had victimized had also found various forms of justice and healing. Some had recovered all their stolen money, others had recovered most of it. All of them had learned valuable lessons about protecting their financial information and the importance of monitoring their accounts closely. 3 of Derek's victims had started a support group for families affected by financial abuse. They met monthly to share resources, provide emotional support, and advocate for stronger protections against identity theft within families. Our family fraud is one of the most underreported crimes in America. The group's leader, Mrs. Henderson, had explained during a television interview. People don't want to believe that someone they love could steal from them, so they make excuses and try to handle it privately. But financial abuse is real abuse regardless of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Derek's case had become something of a cautionary tale in our community, featured in newspaper articles about the warning signs of family financial abuse and the importance of protecting personal information even from trusted relatives. As for Derek himself, I received occasional updates through the Victim Services Coordinator. He was serving his sentence at a federal facility about 300 miles away, participating in financial literacy programs and addiction counseling. Patricia had reported that he'd written letters of apology to his victims, though I hadn't received one myself. Whether Derek would emerge from prison as a genuinely reformed person remained to be seen. 8 years was a long time to think about the consequences of his choices and the people he'd hurt. But transformation was possible for anyone willing to do the hard work of honest self-examination. Standing in my kitchen that Christmas night, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine peace. Emma was safe, our finances were secure, and our family had learned the difference between loyalty and enabling. Some people might think I was too harsh in my response to Derek's theft. They might argue that families should forgive and forget that prosecuting my own brother was extreme. But I'd learned that real love sometimes requires difficult choices. Protecting Emma's future and holding Derek accountable for his actions wasn't cruel, it was necessary. The Christmas presents scattered under our tree weren't the most expensive gifts Emma had ever received, but they were honest ones. Purchased with money that belonged to us, given with love that came without conditions or manipulation, opened in a home where she was valued and protected. That was worth more than all the stolen PlayStation consoles and designer coats in the world. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I thought about what Uncle Robert had said about choices defining families. Derek had made choices that destroyed trust and caused tremendous pain. But the rest of us had made different choices: the choice to seek justice, to demand accountability, to rebuild relationships on foundations of honesty and respect. Those choices had led us here to a Christmas that was modest, but genuine, difficult, but healing. We were a smaller family now, but a stronger one. And Emma was growing up understanding that she deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, that her needs mattered as much as anyone else's, and that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make the right choices, even when they were difficult. But tonight, in our quiet apartment, filled with the warm glow of honest Christmas lights, everything was exactly as it should be. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself or your children? How did you handle a situation where someone you trusted violated that trust? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more content about family dynamics, financial protection, and standing up for what's right. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this message about boundaries and self-protection, please share this story with them. Thank you for listening, and remember, protecting yourself and your loved ones isn't selfish, it's necessary. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.